Thank you. Can I take a picture of you? I love seeing my audience, or seeing the people that I'm going to speak to. Yeah, no, I won't do a selfie. I'm more interested in you. This is not about me. This is about you. So, managers and leaders who are implementing lean and continuous improvement techniques are, of course, every day Kaizening their own activities, their own work to become more productive, aren't we? Aren't we? As managers and leaders, we are very productive, aren't we? So, leadership and management, as Drew carefully explained to us before, is a lot about leading by example. Helping people to see and be a role model to the way that we want them to be, the way we want them to act. I was very fortunate to spend a number of years with Toyota in the 90s when they launched in the UK. I was in charge of their machine shop, and I had, we called him a coordinator. You can call it sensei if you want, but this guy was with me for 2 years solidly, 2 years. And every day he would ask me questions. His name was Onodera-san. And Onodera-san would say to me, Mike-san, my job is to teach you how to think. My job is to teach you the thinking way of Toyota. Because it's not about tools. It's not about the tools and techniques. It's about the thinking. If you think the right way, then you will find the tool to solve the problem. My job today is to make you think. Teaching people how to think. Developing a healthy and progressive relationship with time. Who here feels that there is not enough time to do all the things they want to do? I hope everyone's putting their hand up. We feel it. I don't have enough time to explain it, but I've got a workshop tomorrow that explains a lot about why that is. The modern culture of today is driving us not to have enough time. We have a distraction culture, a multitasking culture. It's taking our time away from us. We have to be very careful with this. Some of it I'll cover today. For those of you who are coming tomorrow, maybe there'll be a few more after this, come along because you'll have an opportunity to understand your perspective and relationship with time. Focusing on value is something a leader must do. Do you agree with that? Yes, of course you do. A leader's job is to focus the organization on value. His job is also to establish systems thinking. We heard one of the presentations recently that talked about everyone working in silos. Systems thinking takes away silos. It connects people. It produces value streams. It engages people so that they can think in a bigger way. Time often is sucked away from us because we don't organize and systemize our activities into the time that we have. I know that everybody in this room can be at least 30% more productive. Is that a bold statement? 30% more productive, and I'm going to prove it to you today. Increasing management productivity is leadership Kaizen. How dare we as managers expect that our workers are 95, 96, 97% productive with their activities, and yet we waste and consume a high proportion of our own time, don't we? I know that doesn't apply to any of you in this room. Oops, where have I gone to? Okay. There are lots of models that you've seen. Jeff Leiker produced a great model, the Toyota Way, or he produced a great book based on Toyota Way model. And then you've got Dan Jones and Jim Womack who talk about the 5 steps to lean implementation, Toyota has its own models for its Toyota Way, which is introduced to its organization really strongly in 2001. And then lots of people become very familiar with a model called the TPS, the Toyota Production System. Why do we have these models? Who can tell me? Take a guess. Yeah, there's a form of roadmap behind there. What else? They are thinking systems. They are ways to think and organize your thoughts in a structure, a framework, so that you have a reference for the journey that you're on. You can call them roadmaps, but I think they're thinking systems. So we need thinking systems to help us do things. I asked before how productive you were. Can everyone stand up a moment, please? Sorry if you've got comfortable, but my job is to keep you awake over the next 45 minutes. Okay, I would like people to sit down if they think they're more than 95% productive in their role. How about 75? If you think you're more than 75% productive, sit down. If you think you're more than 55% productive, sit down. Okay, now we're getting there. Do you think it's acceptable that you're somewhere between 55 and 75% productive as a manager? Because that's what you've just told me. It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. Okay. I think it's all about value. I was at Toyota, we never talked about tools. All we ever talked about was customer value. The next process is my customer. I started to learn these habits and these thinking ways. The next process is my customer. Everything I'm doing is about value. I must eliminate waste. It's all about growing the next person and growing the next leader. Coach, show people how to do. Get people involved. That's all I learned when I was at Toyota. I'm very fortunate to have created that. In fact, you could say that I was brainwashed. You could say that I was brainwashed. But actually, we're all brainwashed. If you've been in an organization for more than 2 years, you are brainwashed. You have adopted the culture of that company. I think the brainwashing that I've had has been very useful for me. It gives me the chance to tour around and see people like yourselves and engage and coach and support lots of people in becoming much more productive in what they do and delivering great results for their company. That's a nice position to be in. Okay. Just take a piece of paper. I'm going to ask you to write quite a lot of things down over this next half an hour, 35 minutes. Just write down what you believe your 5 most valuable activities are in your work. The 5 things that are your most valuable activities. For some leaders I talk to, this is the first time anybody's ever asked them that. They've never thought about which activities are most valuable. Okay, you've got the gist of it. I'm sure you're probably up to 3 or possibly 4. If some of you are still stuck on 1, perhaps it's something you might want to think about. Right, who's heard of the personal efficiency ratio? The ratio to understand how productive you are. Do you want to find out how productive you are as managers and leaders? Maybe you don't. Okay, just have a think about this. Write down the number of hours approximately you work in an average week. I was told that you work probably longer hours than most of us in the Western world. So write down how many hours you work. Now I'm going to give you a figure. And that figure is something that's taken already from a massive amount of research that's been going on over the last 15 or 20 years. The figure is 28%. Now, you'll have to take my word from it, but I'll give you a reference point. The reference is BaseX Research. They're based in New York, and they do research continually about people who work in offices, knowledge workers, leaders, and managers. Okay? So I've put 55 hours just so you can see the calculation. The average time loss that most leaders, managers, and knowledge workers have is somewhere in the region of 28%. Okay? So what's the impact of that on your 55 hours? How many hours are you not productive? Write that down. If you're non-productive in 28% of your time, there's a number of hours there. If it's 55, it's 15.4 hours. Okay. Now write down, I don't want you to tell me this, but write down what you believe your own personal value per hour is. In other words, it's your hourly salary. Now, I've done a little bit of research, and I made a judgment somewhat, probably manages between, I don't know, 550, 650, 750,000 kroner, something like that. Okay, so I've done a figure, and I've said that your average value per hour is roughly 4,700 kroner. Okay, so what's the loss to your business? 72,380 kroner, where you are not adding value. Sorry to tell you that. Okay, you've written down your 5 most valuable activities. You don't have to write them again. Just have a think about it. What's the estimated hours per week that you actually spend on those 5 most valuable activities? Write it down. Let's say it's 20 hours. For some managers that I work with, that I coach, they tell me what their most valuable activities are. And then they tell me that they spend less than 5 hours on those in a week. That is scary. In business generally, most managers are working at a much lower level than what they're being paid for. Everyone's stepping down a level, sometimes 2 levels, which means you're not actually getting the productivity out of the management, and the management productivity is actually about growing the business and making the business perform, not about solving every single problem. We need people to do that. We need to teach them. So let's assume it's 20 hours, okay? The percentage of your time spent in those MVAs, okay? 36.3, if you're taking my calculation. What does that mean to your real value per hour? You're being paid 4,700 kroner. Your real value is 1,700. And that's because we probably not valued the time that we have. Does that make sense? You don't have to tell your bosses this. Just be aware of it. Okay? It's all about value. It's about adding value, increasing value, eliminating waste. And that applies to us as managers as well as it does to every part of our staff, to every person who works in our organization. So when I'm doing these seminars, I actually ask, if you had more time in a day, how would you spend it? I hope you're going to say on your most valuable activities. Okay, so your personal efficiency ratio is the time doing high impact, high value work divided by the time spent at work. Not the time working, the time spent at work. And there's a big difference between no value work, low value work, and high value work. Do you know that? Of course you do. So, if you're less than 37% productive, there's a big opportunity for improvement. You'll get this presentation, so the calculation's already there. You can work it out for yourself. What I would suggest is you write it on your desk, leave it in front of you, and measure it every now and then. If you can improve your productivity by about 2% every month or so, that's going to make a huge difference to you. And you won't be saying, I haven't got time, because you'll be spending on time on the things that make the most difference. So people say there's not enough time. That's a misnomer. That's rubbish. Of course there's enough time. But it doesn't feel like it, does it? It doesn't feel like we have enough time. Time is fixed. It's not going to change. 24 hours in a day. How many hours in a week? 168. How about 720 hours in the average month? A month of about 30 days. How many hours in a year? 8,760. It's fixed. We can't change it. We can't change the number of hours. So if we want to change something in the way that we utilize those hours, it's got to be us. It's got to be about us changing what we do. Who can tell me what time is? It is a resource. A very, very valuable one. What is time? Who invented it? I don't think anybody really knows, but it's a man-made phenomena. It's a concept. It's a concept of how we understand things, how we measure things, how we make judgments, how we align ourselves, how we speak a common language. But it's very, very valuable. Highly precious, irreplaceable, indispensable. In fact, you can't get anything done without it. And yet, not you guys in here, but most people take it for granted and spend it on stuff knowing full well that it's not going to come back, and then they complain that they have no time. Okay, who here has been on a time management course? Ooh, maybe a few more should go. No, don't go. Don't go on a time management course, whatever you do. You can't manage time. It's not possible. It's fixed. You can't manage it. What you have to manage, okay, is yourself. You can master it. You can master time. You can master it by understanding the value of it and then putting in it the things that are going to make the biggest difference. You can master it by leveraging it, by getting other people to do various activities, by delegating. You can master it by managing yourself, your own activities. And you can master it by prioritizing your actions and your activities so that you focus on the things that make the biggest difference. Not just consume it on stuff that doesn't necessarily add value. Does this make sense? Okay. So, who can tell me how to measure productivity? How do we measure productivity in the workplace? What's the calculation? Come on, you're all continuous improvement people. You should be able to tell me how to measure productivity. Or is it just that you're shy after lunch? I know, it's a heavy stomach. Okay. Productivity is a measure of output over time. You know that, don't you? Output over time. That's really, really easy when you're making widgets or cars or electrical components. So how many output did we have today? How many people did we spend doing it? We do a calculation, one divided by another, we get a productivity figure. Man hours per unit or something like that. But how do you measure productivity of a manager? Most people don't even bother. But in actual fact, a manager contributes huge amounts of effort into the business, but if it's not productive effort, it's not going to get the results that you want. So, management productivity, you might want to write this down, because this is really important. It's your activity over time. Of course, that's obvious. Management productivity is activity over time. But let's break activity down a little bit. It's the value of that activity. The value that activity is bringing both to yourself and your role in the business. It's also the direction of that activity, the purpose of it. And finally, it's the impact of that activity. If you understand your activities and you break it down by the value, the purpose, and the impact, you'll suddenly start to realize that there's lots of activities that have no purpose. You've been doing them that way for many years and you've carried on doing them. But you can change that. We have two great resources that belong to us as human beings. One is awareness and the other one is willpower. If you are aware of something, you might want to change it. If you put the willpower behind it, then you can actually achieve anything. Okay, there's a hierarchy. Call it the productivity hierarchy. If you are spending your time on zero or no value activities, it's probably going to have a negative impact on the business. If you spend your time on low value activities, it's probably going to have a little bit of an impact, but nowhere near the impact that you could have if you spent it on high value activities. Your time should be spent, I don't know where that is, on high value activities. And if you're really getting into the holistic way of looking at it, as a human being, you should be spending your time on high lifetime activities, which are producing the result for you as an individual, so that you self-realize, Drew talked before about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Part of that is self-actualization, the realization of achievement. So that could be growth, that could be promotion, that could be producing the best company in the world. That's high lifetime activities. Who's seen this before? Most of you should have done to some extent. When I go into organizations, they all tell me about the waste that they're eliminating. But very often they fail to tell me about the unevenness that they're producing when they're eliminating the waste and the overburden that sometimes happens when they eliminate the waste. You've got to do it in balance. Toyota doesn't just eliminate waste, it looks for ways in which that waste produces overburden. Overburden of humans, overburden of machinery, overburden of processes. It also looks for ways in which it takes out variability, removing unevenness. So it's a holistic way of looking at it. So you're eliminating everything that doesn't add value. And that includes managers and leaders. We have a responsibility to contribute value back into the business and eliminate the waste from our processes, from our activity, from our work. Okay, I'm going to do an experiment now that's going to prove to you that 28%. Take a piece of paper. Okay? I want you to write when I say so, and not before. I want you to write, multitasking is more inefficient than effective. That is the words that I want you to write. But when I want you to do it, I want you to write it across the top line. I know you haven't got this sheet. Multitasking is more inefficient than effective. And then when you've written the sentence, write 1 to 42 under it. When I say go, because I'm going to time you. Because it's an experiment, and when we experiment, we learn things. You ready? Go. When you've done both the words and the numbers, put your hand up. Okay. Seen a few hands go up. Okay. Hands are starting to go up. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Stop it there. I'm stopping it at 44 seconds. Some of you put your hands up at 20 seconds. Some of you put it up at 44. Some of you maybe up to 50. That's fine. That's how long it takes you to do that task. I now want you to change the task a little bit. I want you to change it and write M1. U2, L3, IT4. I want you to multitask between the letters and the numbers. Does that make sense? Go. Put your hands up when you've done. Oh, you couldn't have given up by now. Okay, we've just surpassed 44 seconds. Anyone done it? Okay, so someone has completed 1 minute 2. Okay, there's a few more hands going up now. Yeah, very good. Okay, the rest of you can stop. I'll save you the pain. So somewhere at 1 minute 2 to 1 minute 20 seconds. If you take a calculation, you will find that somewhere between 25 and 35-40% difference. So when we multitask, we are less effective. Does that make sense? Why do we multitask? Why do human beings in the modern age multitask? And I won't get into the argument about whether men can multitask worse than women. Why do we do it? We think we're more productive. We've been told that you can do two things at once. But actually, there's a bigger psychological reason than that. We multitask because as we move up the management chain, we become leaders. And as we become leaders, we think we have to be busy. And being busy means that often we cram our time with things that make us look busy. Does that make sense? We multitask often because we are trying to look busy. But it is not productive. It is not efficient, and it is most certainly not effective. Science proves it. That's quite an easy little experiment that you can try. Do it with a few other people. If you focus on one task that takes you 10 minutes, and then stop that task and move on to another task that takes you 10 minutes, you will finish both tasks in 20 minutes. If you multitask and try and do the two things at once, I can guarantee it will take you more than 30. You try it. And yet, as managers, we are doing reports, we are on our email, we get a phone call, somebody comes into the office, we are multitasking. That is not an effective and efficient way of working. The interesting thing is I was never taught any of this at Toyota. A lot of it I've learned since, but I do know that Toyota uses a lot of the systems from a guy by the name of David Allen, who wrote a great book called Getting Things Done, of which I apply quite a lot of that stuff with my own clients. But Toyota applies a lot of that because it is looking for systems and ways of organizing work, and it's very productive. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to something else now that may well shock you. Did you know that managers have waste? They have systemic time stealers. And I have identified 11 of them. There's actually more than that, but I wanted to keep it down. 11 systemic time stealers. And I've got an acronym called complacency, which basically explains them. Now, the only reason for the acronym is just so that you can remember it. Time stealer number 1, complacency. Any manager that accepts poor performance without trying to understand the root cause and trying to help somebody improve that performance is complacent. That is a waste. Managers who are disorganized, who don't apply good 5S systems in the way that they manage their time, the way they manage their workspace, that is a waste. It produces searching, it produces duplication, it produces a whole range of other things which don't add value. Multitasking, we've just seen it. Limit the amount of multitasking that you do, and I can guarantee you will suddenly become more productive. But it's going to be very hard because you have a habit now of multitasking. Procrastination. Managers who say they're going to do something, but then they never really get round to doing it. Sometimes because the task's too big, or it seems too hard, or they can't get the right people around them. Procrastination utilizes brain power, causes delay, it doesn't add value. Lack of focus. Managers who can't focus, leaders who can't focus, who are flitting around from one thing to another, probably even multitasking, that is not adding value. Making assumptions, a big sin. The reason we make assumptions is because we don't want to go out and really understand the truth. That adds no value. Miscommunication. When we don't communicate well and we don't receive communication very well and we don't manage communication very well, that is a waste. Exactness. You could call it perfectionism. I know in Lean we talk about getting it right first time, but that's when we've actually got a process in place and we've designed it and we have standards. But if you're trying to be exact and perfect with everything that you're doing, you're never going to change things. You're never going to experiment. That is a waste. No planning. There's a lot of managers around who don't believe in planning. Managers in lean organizations who don't believe in planning. What's the point in planning? Because the second they've launched the plan, it's not going to be real. So they don't plan. But they don't plan their own time, so therefore they fill it with stuff that doesn't add value. Correction. We all know that waste. It applies in most of the process wastes as well. And finally, you. your relationship with time will produce non-value added activities. So now, does anyone recognize any of those wastes in your own habits? Of course you do. That means you can do something about it. So I've done two things now. One is I've raised levels of awareness. I've probably even made you feel a little bit uncomfortable. The first thing to change is awareness. Once you have awareness of something, you can then choose to change. The commitment comes later, but you can choose to change. So value and systems thinking. Managers and leaders who are most effective add value in a business and make a difference. They have systems and routines. What systems and routines do you have so that you have built habits and patterns of working? Mike Rodder talks about the kata pattern, the pattern of coaching, the pattern of continuous improvement, identifying a root cause, identifying a target condition, and then working towards that target condition. That is a pattern. That is a pattern of activity which is moving us forward to an improved way of doing something. But you as managers and leaders can have patterns as well. Your business represents you. It's a reflection of who we are as leaders and managers. So we have to think about that. Because your personal systems and your business systems, okay, are interrelated. If you're not very well organized, that will have an impact on the business. If your business systems aren't very well designed, then that will have an impact on the business. So it's really about looking at the whole thing in a holistic way. Systems are routines of work and activity that are well defined, recorded, and standardized. They're consistent ways of doing things. They produce habits. We want to produce habits as leaders because it releases some of our capacity and our brain power to think out how we're going to coach and engage and support people in their continuous improvement activities. Good systems are efficient and effective, add value. By the same nature, poor systems, poor work habits, consume time and produce waste. A leader and a manager should be an architect and a designer of the business systems, and we should certainly be role modeling that. Okay, when we're in lean and we're trying to implement continuous improvement, I actually don't really like the word lean. I know it's Lean Island. I actually think there's so many poor connotations of lean. I personally prefer the opportunity for us to continuously improve. It's all about getting better at something. But for the sake of this, when we're implementing lean or continuous improvement activities, we start off with understanding where we are, don't we? We start off with some sort of analysis, some sort of current state. And we do value stream mappings. We do various analysis. We do SWOT analysis. And we carry out a feeling for understanding where we are. And then we grab the facts so that we can actually measure, when we set a target condition, the difference between where we are now and where we need to go to. As a manager and leader, you can do exactly the same. You've now got some insight that says, these are some of the wastes. I can probably decide to remove some of those. So, there's analysis tools. There's things that you can do to understand where you spend your time, how much on, the typical things that are going to add value, what are the most valuable activities, what are the least valuable activities, can I actually change some of them, can I systemize it? You can do all of that. And there are lots of tools and techniques out there, and I would suggest if you are looking for more time, then there's an opportunity to do that. We launched this program called Releasing Time to Lead about 5 or 6 years ago, and the reason for that was a lot of the companies that we were working with, they were constantly telling me, yeah, you're telling me about getting out onto the shop floor, you're telling me I need to coach, they're telling me I need to have a different way in which I manage and communicate and everything else, but I haven't got the time for that. So right up front, we put a program called Releasing Time to Lead, and we're running part of that tomorrow. Well, we're running the whole thing condensed into one day, but it's actually a 2-day course. And the idea behind that is giving people the wherewithal and the thinking and the patterns and some of the tools so they can go away and start to analyze their own time and become more productive. So, where is your time going? When we did some analysis about 2 years ago, what we find out was lots of people's time gets spent on email. Somewhere in the region of 6% can be recovered if we have good email systems, and most people don't. Who here has been on email training courses to teach you all about Outlook, teach you all about how you systemize your folders and flow everything? Who's been on courses? That's typical. Very few people. And the reason for that is most companies don't realize the seriousness of the email and the email system and how it drains people's time. Organizing your information, how it flows, having a next step condition, a target condition, identifying what that is, when you're going to do it, where it's going to be done, and then filtering the information in a processing way through that, you can probably recover somewhere in the region 9%. What about meetings? Productive meetings. How many people here have been to meetings in your company or other companies that have just had no value whatsoever? Isn't that shocking? Isn't that shocking? That's a form of complacency that we've not addressed it. Maybe it's not you. That's obviously somebody else's meeting that you attended. Okay, 11% time can be recovered that way. If you plan and organize your time in a very systematic way, you can get 8% back. Even interruptions, 17% of people that we studied and analyzed realized that there's 17% of opportunity for recovering time if they could just reduce the amount of interruptions that they have. That's huge. And there's a reason why people interrupt us, because we don't have a communication system which follows a pattern of meeting people in a certain way and communicating in a certain way. Okay. Organize to systemize, then standardize to optimize. It's just a way of remembering something. Organize how you do your work, okay? Then systemize it so it starts to become routine. Then standardize it so that then you can build a habit. And then you can look for ways of eliminating the waste and streamlining it so that it becomes optimized. You can probably recognize that. It's probably not a lot different than 5S. Okay. We have an activity called a time budgeter. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to show you that. But those of you who come in tomorrow will get an opportunity to actually look at it. All it is it's a budgeting tool. Time is just like money. Well, it's actually not just like money, because actually I can save money and then I can get it back in another way. But I can't do that with time. Once it's gone, it's gone. If I don't budget it right, if I don't know the activities that I'm working on, whether they add value or not, and then I'm adjusting my time and organizing my time, then I will consume that time and it will be gone forever. So we have a budgeting tool. And the budgeting tool allows us to define the activity, scope of the activity, the value of the activity, the customer of the activity. Every activity has an output, and therefore it has a customer. The current hours that you're working on that particular activity, the actual value per hour, the value of the activity, the impact on the business. You can rank it on your whether it's one of your most valuable activities, and then you can set a vision of where you want to be. So you have a way in which you are doing almost like a current state mapping of your time and activity. Then you can set a target condition for the step, and then you manage it through PDCA. Who here manages their time with PDCA? Very good. PDCA is our tool. It's a management tool. It's the cycle of continuous improvement, and yet very few managers utilize it on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis. It's a great way of thinking about where am I now, where do I want to be, what's my target condition, what am I going to do, measure against the gap, close the gap, and gradually move towards it. It's a great tool, but most people don't recognize it. They think it's wrapped up with some big massive plan that we have to put in place over a 12-month period. It's not. PDCA is a thinking way. Has anyone come across Yamazumi before? I wasn't sure whether you guys might have done. Some of you may have done. Yamazumi is a way in which companies, from car industry uses it a lot, but basically what they do is they collect magnets, and they build magnets up for every process, and each process tells you whether that activity adds value or not. And what you can do is you can start to build a picture of an activity. Now this is process Yamazumi. To call it work balance board is probably another way of looking at it, but it's specifically used to eliminate the waste so that when you're making takt time changes, you're adjusting things so that therefore you can actually increase the value. The opportunity of it, it gives you the opportunity to remove labor from the process sometimes, and it gives you the opportunity to smooth it and balance that labor out. Okay? But you could apply this to management, and that's exactly what we did. We built a couple of spreadsheets and we analysed it. And so basically we got people to collect their activity, to measure their activity, to build a pattern, to look at all the red, and then they could actually start to analyse where they're going to eliminate the waste. Really easy. When you're eliminating the waste, you can then measure it over a period of time. And so what you end up is taking a position where you've got waste in your process, taking some of that waste out. You're probably not going to take all of it out because some of it's embedded patterns that you maybe have and the business systems that you have. And then you can start to actually remove some of that waste and release some of that time. Just on the multitasking alone, if you're 28% inefficient, that's 1 day a week. If you start to add better productive meetings, more systematic with your email, better planning, and you can take another 15% out, that's 2 days a week that you could spend doing more productive things. Yes? Okay, I'm going to really wrap it up on the model, to be honest. Focus on value. Focus on value. Once you've understood value, understand the inner game. The reason we don't do things is really because we have an inner feeling. It's built in around our beliefs, the way we think, what we value, what's most important to us. You need to work on your inner game, and then you can start to work on time. Then you have to grasp the truth. What's the truth? What's the reality of how our time works? Then it's about planning and organizing, developing the systems that enable you to organize yourself in such a systematic way that it becomes habitual. When it becomes habitual, it becomes routine. When it becomes routine, then you can start to utilize it and really drive it. And finally, developing your communications plan. So it becomes a whole system. It's just a model to give you a reference point. Systemize your activities and habitualize your procedures. Okay, so value time, systemize your actions, contextualize, and focus on your big rocks. Has anyone ever seen that big rocks activity? Okay, so some of you will see it tomorrow. It's a really useful one. When you understand what your big rocks are, your most valuable activities, it completely transforms how you focus your time. Inner game, grasp reality, planning and organizing, and your communications plan. And it's all done with PDCA. Now, there are a few other things I was going to wrap up in there, but I think I've overrun. Have I overrun by a lot? Okay, I apologize. I always try to cram too much in. I get told about that. So, does anyone have any questions? Okay. Okay.